Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Move, Crush, Count. This is the podcast where we learn how achievers are changing business growth strategies. We're here to help you grow your business and show you how to move the crowd, crush the competition, and count the money. Today's interview is sponsored by J&L Marketing. J&L Marketing is a digital and direct marketing agency that helps you deliver results with strategies that are going to help you outsmart competitors so you don't have to outspend them. The title of today's interview is Client Retention Mistakes to Avoid. My name's Scott Joseph. Today I'm talking with the president and CEO of Traction, Dave Boyle. Welcome, Dave Boyle.
How you doing, my friend?
I am doing great. You
Good.
as well, I hope.
I am good, man. I am good. I am trying to stay warm here in Dallas. It's freezing right now, which we're not used to. So,
well, you guys deserve a little bit of that cold weather every now and then. You know, we have to suffer through it for 3 or 4 months up here.
I know. It's well, there's worse things to complain about, right? So,
correct.
It's not all bad.
You know, you're a well-known expert when it comes to client retention, and you've been gracious enough to share your knowledge and your experience with Move, Crush, Count with the audience, and basically to help us avoid some of the damaging mistakes when it comes to client retention. So we can get a better understanding of how to speed up growth. Because in the end, if we're losing clients as fast as we're getting them, we're not growing, right? We're just spinning our wheels and we're in neutral. And in worst case, we're going backwards. So we don't want to do that. So let's just jump right in. I want the audience to know who you are in case they don't know who you are. Where's your experience come from? What are the experiences that have gotten you to this point that made you an expert in this area? And we'll take it from there.
Well, Scott, I don't know if I'm an expert on anything, but I've certainly been around this business a long time. It was interesting. I was on another panel, I think it was last week or week before, and it was entitled the Legends Panel. And I was included in part of that Legends panel with none other than Les Silver and John Traver and a few guys like that in our industry, Dave O'Brien, guys like that. And I kind of sort of felt like I didn't belong. First of all, I said I was way too young to be on a Legends panel, but they all laughed at that. And then I looked at the guys across from me and I said, well, I'm the only one with hair, so I don't belong. I certainly don't belong on a Legends panel. But it was a really interesting conversation because we got to reminisce on the things that I've been involved in my career that spans now 30 years. So I am that old, I guess. But I started off. I jokingly tell people I probably couldn't tell you how to sell a car to save my life. I have spent 100% of my career on the fixed operations side. Started off graciously with a guy named Les Silver at a company called NewGen back in the very, very early 90s, like 1990-ish. Grew that company into a pretty substantial business, and then started a second business with him called MPI, Mobile Productivity, which became
NewGen. And just so Dave, the audience is, I mean, that company sold for a pretty penny, didn't it?
But both of these companies sold for a pretty penny. But NewGen is an interesting business, and I would say that a big chunk of a lot of the vendor solutions that are out there today on the service side probably can trace their roots back to NewGen somewhere, either through the products or the people that we brought through that organization. John Traver and I have had this conversation numerous times with all the great work that he's doing over there at Traver Connect. But the whole idea of, I was telling this story to a mutual friend of ours, Sandy Cerami, the other day. I was telling him that, the idea of taking overload from inbound phone traffic from a car dealership. People talk about that as being some new revolution. We were doing that back in 1989, 1990, without the advantage of the internet. We were doing trunk to trunk transfers with we had a product called Reservations, where during peak hours we would shift inbound switchboard traffic from a dealership to our call center. And they would the agents would act on behalf of the dealership and schedule an appointment. We were able to get right into their system and look at their scheduling and loading. And we were doing things back then, quite frankly, that are still cool today, and a lot of companies are doing today. And we were doing them, 30 plus years ago in some cases. And certainly CRM, multi-point inspections, outsourcing of CRM and call center activities and stuff like that. I mean, we were one of the first to do all of that. And it was quite a learning career for me, learning opportunity for me, I guess, under Les more than anything, because he's, I think, widely viewed as he is the legend, I think, in on the service side of our business. There's a handful of guys in our industry, both on the sales and the service side. He's one of them that's sort of been there and done everything. And I got a chance to, have a front row seat and work with him and do a lot of stuff with him over the years that I'm, pretty proud of some of those accomplishments. But it's, like I said, I don't know if that makes me an expert on anything, but I've certainly been around a lot. And what I tell people all the time, I tell dealers this all the time, that I think the perspective that I have that's unique is that I've probably been in close to 4,000 car dealerships in my life, of all shapes and sizes over the years, and pretty much probably seen it all in terms of processes, good ones, bad ones, everything in between. It's if that makes me, smarter at some of this stuff than I guess I am. But
well, I've listened to you speak, and I know that you come about with a lot of your solutions with client retention in ways that maybe a lot of people don't think about. And I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to discussing some of those things. But, what would you say is your best source of training? We're going to call you an expert. All right. Okay. And so you're humbly going to say you're not sure about that. Sure. And I appreciate that. But what would you say is the best source of training or experience that's led you to where you are today in terms of this knowledge?
I mean, everybody that's ever been a customer of mine. I like to think of the fact that I'm a student of the industry and, ask more questions, talk less, ask more questions type of an environment. And, I'm still learning today. I mean, I thought I knew everything. And then I meet guys like Ed Roberts and guys like that are doing some things in this industry that are pretty amazing. And I think I learn every day from people that are customers of mine, dating back 30 plus years. But the other thing I think that's, as my career has evolved and I've obviously have a company that I'm running now, it gives you a bit of a different perspective. And one of the things that I've noticed myself doing lately, Scott, is because of the position that I've got in this company in particular, I sort of find myself often sort of on the other side of the table in some ways, where people are trying to help me run my business and pitching me on things. And that's allowed me to sort of step back and think about things maybe from a different perspective. I had an interesting conversation with a guy a couple of weeks ago who was a senior executive at Marriott. And I'm a huge Marriott guy, as you and I have talked about. I am the loyal. I think I calculated one day that I think in my lifetime, I think I've spent 3.5 years in Marriott's. I'm their top status and they can never take it away. And, I've learned a lot from that group, but I had an interesting conversation with this guy about retention recently that actually got me thinking about this whole notion of retention a little bit differently.
So I want to get into that. So I love that you bring up hospitality because to me, or even any other industry, I just sit there. To me, I can tell you from J&L standpoint, right? Way back early 2000s, this is like between 2000, 2003. And back then I can tell you marketing companies that were basically selling to car dealers. For the most part, we were either buying or renting our data. And if we were working inside the dealer's database, a lot of the work was nothing more than, in terms of the data management, was really nothing more than just basic data segmentation.
Sure.
Today any eighth grader that has an Excel document could probably have done what was being done back then.
Sure.
And I remember getting pitched, or a data company was coming in and educating me on, just different algorithms that could be done, predictive modeling that could be done. And there were some companies not necessarily selling straight to the dealers, but big companies that were doing some modeling. And it really, especially from an owner loyalty type standpoint, and it really made me think, what can I do on the agency side to take us a step up and really separate us in terms of data? And if it wasn't for me listening to other companies pitching me,
Exactly.
I think you said something earlier. I think that's a big plus as well. I think there's a big advantage when you're a B2B.
Right.
Because when you're a B2B, you're selling other businesses, right? So you're exposed to so many different processes and ideas in terms of a variety of different things, whether it's a sales process, whether it's a client retention process, marketing, it doesn't matter. So I just think there's a big advantage to that that you may not necessarily always get when you're a B2C. So to me, I love what you're saying there. So let's jump right in. Let's get into some of these mistakes. So for you, what's the number one mistake that you think business leaders make in the area? And we'll go broad when it comes to client retention.
Well, if you had asked me that question probably a month ago, I may have answered it differently. But I mentioned that I had a chance conversation with an executive that worked at Marriott, happened to be on an airplane. How many times have we had conversations over our careers on airplanes, right? Where you get seated next to somebody, right? And I was, on a 2-hour flight coming back from Vegas and SEMA, and I got seated next to a guy that I happened to see the tag on his luggage and saw that he was a Marriott executive. And we, told him, I showed him my fancy Marriott, Premier Platinum for Life card or whatever. And we had a conversation about business philosophies, and retention came up. And one of the things that struck me in that conversation, and it struck me for two reasons. One, it struck me as being so simple, and one of their reasons for success. But it also struck me from the standpoint is that with all the conversation that we've had in our industry for decades about retention in the service business, or the car business in general, I should say, I'm not 100% sure this thing that I'm about to say we're doing very well, and that is, well, let me ask you. Let me come at this a little bit different way. Let me ask you a question, because I think everybody knows that obviously, you're on the agency side, but you're a dealer as well. If I were to ask you as a dealer, what's your retention spend? Would you be able to answer that question?
I can, only because I'm on the marketing side too, and we do the marketing for
exactly.
That I can.
Right. But I think the other thing to think about this, true retention spend, because
let me clarify that.
Okay.
Only as it relates to marketing. Only as it relates to marketing.
Right.
Yeah.
And and because there's a lot of things that we've kind of we lump in that bucket as retention. The recapture strategies. If I went and asked any dealer today, what's your advertising spend, what's your marketing spend per copy, they'd be able to answer that question. They'd be able to say, I spend X amount in marketing and advertising to sell a vehicle. What do you?
By the way, I hate that answer. I hate not your answer. I hate when clients give me like, this is what I spend and it's better than everyone else, or this needs to improve, because what are you comparing it to?
Right.
Because if I go into any dealer's system and look at, every dealer's got a different combination of expenses that they put into cost of sales and or their marketing expense, you could never get the data is not accurate,
right,
because everyone's got a different idea of what should be in there.
Right. One of the things that I learned from this conversation with this guy from Marriott is they know at a very granular level what they're spending at the individual level on client retention. If you think about the hotel industry, it's sort of, they're in the repeat and referral business just like we're in, right? And they rely heavily on, loyalty and repeat customers and coming back. And it's also a very competitive business. There's hotel chains all over the place. It's very, very competitive. In fact, under the Marriott umbrella, they're competitive with themselves in many cases because they've got so many different brands, and each brand has a strategy. And they can tell you, even at the hotel manager level, they know what they're spending per location on pure retention activities. I'm not talking about recapture, because that's not retention. I'm not talking about marketing to get people, okay, to come and stay at the hotel. I'm talking about if I have a loyal customer that's David Boyle, who spent, 27 nights last quarter with us, or last year with us. How do I make sure that I keep him coming back over and over and over again? And it's about so many things that we talk about all the time in our industry: client experience. It's about training. It's about all of the systems and processes. But they have distilled this down to numbers. They know exactly what they're spending to be good at it. And this is an area where I think dealers, I don't think we do that at all. Like, I don't think a dealer knows at all what they're spending on retention. And because if they did,
David, I'll take it a step further, and I'll expand this past dealers. I'll exclude the hospitality industry because I think they probably got some of the better owner loyalty programs in terms of metrics and what they're monitoring and tracking. But think about this. You just said, how many nights have I stayed? How many dealers know how many times you've been in their service department? All right. Or how many times you've bought a car in the last 3 years. In other words, they may have in their system, they have to look you up, and then they'd have to go in and actually say, all right, he bought one here. He bought one here. He was in service here. Why isn't there a number that says Dave's been in 3 times this year, 3 times for service? Oh, and within a year and 18 months ago, he bought a car, and that should be a total on every single customer. And then you should have averages based on those things, and dealers don't have that.
No, they don't. And you talk about going back to the hospitality industry.
Most businesses don't, by the way.
Right. They understand spend to the level that they get future spend. So they know the value of me, and they know likely what I'm going to spend next year, and they know what they need to spend in order to make sure I do.
Correct.
Right.
And let's face it, some clients, and it's a great fantasy land that we live in to think all clients are equal and we should treat everybody. But the reality is
they're not.
There are some clients that deserve better treatment.
Right. Well, I mean, absolutely. And there's some clients that want certain things, and other clients that but something, to me, it's even more basic than that, Scott, because I honestly believe that if you had an honest conversation with most dealers, and you sat there and you figured out, okay, what am I spending on certain things? Obviously training and marketing and systems and technology and all of that stuff. And if you could actually break it down to how much of that stuff am I spending on my business that directly relates to retaining customers, I think, unfortunately, you'd find that it's a very, very small number, maybe even zero in some cases, because I think a lot of dealers incorrectly confuse, retention with marketing, and retention with recapture.
Right.
Letting a customer get away and then, spending $600 a copy to get them to come back to buy another car from you, that's not retention. Okay. That's marketing. That's advertising. Right.
That's correct.
And what I've been telling dealers forever and ever and ever is, if you just kept them more current and more active in your service department, that number that you spend on advertising per car, every copy would go down and down and down, because you wouldn't have to work so hard to get them to come back and buy another car. Your service department does that work for you.
And Jay Abraham, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. Jay Abraham has always taught there's only 3 ways to grow a business. That's the one, to grow your active customer base. There's a lot of strategies that go in that. Retention obviously is one. New client acquisition obviously needs to be part of that as well. But like we said earlier, it's much easier to grow your active customer base if you're not losing them.
Right.
Right. But you also have to grow how frequently people buy from you. All right. And grow that average transaction value. And if you can focus on those 3 things, just a 10% growth in those 3 things per year is 33% growth. You can run the numbers all you want. You will experience 33% growth at a 10% increase in those 3 categories. Now, what you're talking about, this should apply. It doesn't matter. The auto industry does a decent job of at least understanding back end sales, right? You buy a car, you go to F&I. There's opportunities to increase transaction value with that. We've all got service, most have service departments. So you've got opportunities for back end sales to increase the frequency of how often people are buying from you. And in a perfect world, they'd stay loyal and move on, and then you'd sell them another car. But this, if you're not in auto, you've got to be listening to this and thinking, all right, what can I do rather than being a one-time transaction type person, right? But let's get back into this, because even when you have these back end strategies like our service department is, and hey, I say back end, but a lot of times our clients come into us through our fixed stops as well. So, fixed stops in your service department can obviously be a great source of new business as well, and bring people into the pipeline that way as well. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to make sure that the people in the audience that are non-auto, I want them thinking like, what can I do to grow, and what can they learn from the things and the mistakes we're going to be talking about here to help them avoid those as well, right?
Right. Well, I think
So,
if there's some people in non-auto that are listening, some of them are probably scratching their heads right now, I think, a little bit, because the other thing that I think is, and unfortunately, there's going to be probably a few people listening that disagree with what I'm about to say, but we are still, as an industry, in terms of everything under the roof, under the umbrella of a car dealership, we are still very, very, very segmented when it comes to departments. We look at department profitability individually. We manage things individually. We've got these silos within our businesses, and we're really not geared around running this thing as a holistic business from front to back, or however you want to categorize front and back.
David, the manufacturer is the same way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Go look at an owner loyalty program from a manufacturer standpoint. It's strictly based on the back end, and a true owner loyalty program should start from before you buy the car. But let's just take it from the moment you buy a car. There should be a honeymoon phase where they're clearly not ready in those first few months for any type of fixed ops or service department, but there has to be communication that what I'll call a honeymoon phase that needs to go through. There needs to be then the maintenance phase, right? Keeping them active within the store, but then there needs to be pull ahead that brings them back into sales at some point. But when you're talking about owner loyalty from a manufacturer, even those are segmented. One hand doesn't necessarily they're not a coordinated effort.
For sure. But I shared this at a number of events that I've spoken at recently, and it, Cox has some interesting data out right now. Finally, anecdotally, I've been saying since the beginning of my career, Les and I have talked about this for years in terms of, the notion of sales, sell, service. And we know that if you keep the customer, if you keep them active, engaged in your service department, you're less likely to sell them another vehicle. And all these conversations have been anecdotal until now, where we got enough data around this that we actually have some hard numbers on this. And I don't have the numbers sitting right in front of me, but I quote these numbers all the time. They're not my numbers. This is a study that Cox did, but it's about a 70 to 80% swing in likelihood that a customer is going to buy another vehicle from you if they've serviced their car with you in the 12 months, at least once in the 12 months prior to making that decision. So if there was
that percentage again,
there's at least I'm going to butcher the numbers. I think it's around 50%. I think let me see if I get this right. If they've had at least one service visit in a 12-month period prior to making the decision, they're 75%, I think it's 74% likely to buy another car from you. Conversely, if they haven't had a visit in the 12 months prior, they're only 30% likely. So, there's a massive swing there that, for the first time ever, perhaps, has put some hard numbers around the importance of keeping them engaged in the service department as it pertains to selling them that next vehicle. We've always talked about it as an industry, and anecdotally, we've always known it, but I think there's some hard data around it. And, you started this by saying, what are some of the mistakes or what are some of the pitfalls that dealers make? I'm going to give you the biggest one. I don't believe there's a dealer out there that can honestly say that he or she has actually serviced a vehicle of theirs, maybe ever. I mean,
That's probably true. Well,
I
right
mean,
now they are, because they have to keep them for a lot longer than
well,
they
they do,
normally.
but even when they keep them, listen, I was in retail for a brief period back at the beginning of my career, and I was a service manager. And my routine every Monday morning was my GM would walk through the door and he would toss me his keys and he would say, "Wash it and do whatever it needs," right? And then I would give him the demo back at the end of the day, and he would drive it home. And I guarantee you, if I called, well, you don't live near your store, so it's probably not true. But I guarantee if you did, you'd do the same thing, right?
That's intentional, Dave. I was too worried
that would happen.
I'd piss off, potential clients when I'm driving down the street being upset at bad drivers. So I didn't want to have to always have a smile on my face everywhere I go.
I'm impressed by the fact that the last time I was at your house, you actually drive a Honda, which I'm impressed by, because there's a lot of dealers out there that don't drive their own make, right?
Yeah.
And that sort of goes along with what I'm saying, right? Is they're really out of touch of what's going on in their own business, right? And listen, these are the guys that are running these businesses. I've said this a million times. I think car dealers are some of the brightest and most resilient entrepreneurs in the world. They've survived so many things, but the one thing that they're really not good at is understanding in totality their business. They like to say they get their service department. And what I tell dealers to do all the time, I say, listen, just move your office onto the service drive, not for a day, for a month. If you can stand it. You probably can't, because some of the things that you will see and some of the processes that you'll see and some of the things you'll see your customers endure, you want to drive, you'll pull your hair out, right? But I think they're completely out of touch with what is the reality of the processes back there. And, you talk about, my business, obviously my little niche that I'm in right now is in the tire side, right? And I believe that, in addition to what we just talked about with that Cox data, we've got some strong data that there's a direct linkage between not only servicing your vehicle, but the impact that not selling them tires has ultimately on defection and the flip side of that, which is retention with your service department. I tell service managers to do this all the time. Call up your dealership and pretend you're somebody else. Do one of those, what's that TV show where the undercover boss, do an undercover boss on your own dealership and try to buy a tire. Try to get a set of tires put on your car at most car dealerships. It is the most painful process ever at most dealerships. And, the fix for retention in many cases starts right there, right? You got to understand the business that we're in. And if we believe that service is got this massive impact on selling the next vehicle, and we believe that tires are the number one defection point, which they are, then it starts to all point to one thing, right? Okay, how do I get good at doing these few things, tires being one of them, that are going to help me retain more customers and ultimately let me sell more vehicles? And I got to tell you something. Our mutual friend Sandy Cerami and I had this conversation last night. The clock.
You keep saying mutual. It's just confusing.
I know. He says the same thing about you, by the way. We've endured a lot in this industry. 2008, COVID, chip shortages. What we're about to enter in this next couple of years, I think, is not going to be any fun.
No.
We're headed for an economic downturn that's not going to be any fun for these guys. And you got the wind noise of EVs. You've got, interest rates are going to start climbing. This is not going to be fun. This is going to be one of those challenging times. And it's the perfect opportunity, I think, for dealers to really sort of peel back the onion, get down to the, get off the 30,000 foot level and get down to the street level at what's going on in their business and really understand the things that are the key drivers to retention, and then understand from a business perspective, am I doing things and this is where I come back to this spend. What am I doing to have a positive impact? Do I have the right processes in place? Do I have the right people in place? Am I training? Do I have the right tools? In the case of the things that my company does, do I have the right technology in place to really have a positive impact on retention? And I personally think that this is something that the industry needs to start to track. we need to start to separate from all the other stuff that we spend money on and figure out what are the key sort of pillars of retention in our business and understand how we're supporting those financially in order to be successful. I think if dealers started to track this and step one, what I think would be to realize that they're probably not spending anything on real retention.
Well, what about just, understanding your data? And I'm not talking about, all right, well, here we go. Our service department did this. This is how many hours. That's a completely different scorecard. And that's a scorecard that's needed, right? Because you've got to hold everyone accountable and you got to manage to all that type of data. But in terms of loyalty and retention, those numbers have nothing to do with anything.
No.
So,
it's interesting, and this is going to be a shameless pitch for both of us, I guess, on some ways, but managing the data is a big part of it, but you got to have some of this data to manage in the first place. And if you're not smart about the type of technology that you employ in your stores, things like you do, things like my company does, you're going to be missing out on some of this really critical data that's going to allow you to manage this aspect of your business better, because some of this data just isn't there. We have I keep going back to tires, obviously that's my business, but as an industry, we have very little information on tires and where people are buying tires and when they need tires and stuff like that. And that's really because of the retention angle on this, Scott. That's really why we started this company, was not to create tools and technology to measure tires. It was to create data so that our customers could ultimately manage that aspect of the customer life cycle, be better at it, and ultimately retain more customers.
What do you think is the big mistake that causes a lot of business leaders to completely fail when it comes to improving retention? So in other words, we just talked about what's the number one mistake that people make, but here's the one that it's just a complete fail when we do it.
I think a lot of it is really understanding what customers really want when it comes to retention. It's and I should say what customers really want when it comes to loyalty. It's and I'll use another industry that's in the sort of in the hospitality business that doesn't understand it, in my opinion, the way that Marriott does, and that's the airline industries. They're completely clueless when it comes to this. They got a guy like me as an example. I mean, I spend this insane amount of money every year on airplane tickets, right? And they think that air miles is important to me. Are you kidding me? I've got like almost 2 million American airline miles. If anybody wants some, give me a call. I mean, I'll never be able to use them. Airline miles are not important to me. You know what?
I accumulate the miles faster than I can use them.
You know what is important to me as a frequent flyer? Upgrades.
Correct.
Getting that first class seat. And you know what American just did? They made it harder for people. They made it easier for certain people to get upgrades, which in turn made it harder for their most loyal customers, their customers that spend the most, to get upgrades. I mean,
or how about
disconnected?
Or how about easier access or less expensive access for loyal customers into their lounges? Quicker admission, no lines, whatever it might be. I mean, there's a lot of convenience things they could do. I'll tell you one thing. You brought up not understanding what the client wants, right? So first you got to understand why clients leave. And the last point, there's only really 3 reasons clients leave us. One, they move out of our market. Nothing we can really do about that. The second one, which I think most people think is the number one reason, which is not, is we do something to upset them. Right. If we're lucky, the client will tell us and give us an opportunity to do what's right. But the reality is most clients do not do that. So when clients leave, you've got to reach out to them first off and find out, which one of these three of these I'm going to mention? Did they move? Did I do something to upset them? Then you got to make it right. But the third, and I think this, I'm going to give you a little segue here into saying some stuff, because I think you're onto something here from an industry standpoint. And that is, the third reason is they get out of their routine of doing business with us. So we're we're creatures of habit, right? We bought a car and all right, now I'm going to get my service done, this and that. And then for whatever reason, warranty expires, you know, in your case, you know, tires, it's time to change the tires. A lot of times that's around the warranty, right?
Right.
And I get out of habit because, all right, I just went ahead and said, you know what? I don't have time to go to the store. I'm not under warranty anymore anyways. I need to do that oil change. I'm going to do that brakes. Can this Jiffy Lube or whatever store, Valvoline store, can they get me in right now? It's convenience, right? Sometimes it's price, whatever perception is to the client. So now they've left you, not with the intention to leave you as a client, but just this one-time instance, but their pattern, they've now interrupted their pattern. And so now it's out of sight, out of mind. You've just been forgotten. And now it's just become a new pattern. So it was nothing you really did. It's just something that happens, and you can't fix or win these people back until you know why they left you. And I'll let you, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, like you said, it often isn't anything that we did. If you think about it, listen, we never want to screw up when it comes to a customer, but the one positive side of screwing up when it comes to a customer is they're still a customer at that point. You got an opportunity to fix it. The ones that scare me are the ones that just disappear and we never see them any again, and we never know why. And, you mentioned tires, and obviously, that's a passion of ours here, but it is the number one driver in the service department. We know that now. I mean, 10 years later, we have tons of data on that. It's the number one driver of defection. And it is for exactly what you just said. It's viewed as an inconvenient thing to get done at the dealer, and they gravitate elsewhere because of convenience in many cases. Sometimes it's a perception of price, but it's often convenience and a little bit of price. And then once they gravitate away, then we don't get them back. And we don't get them back in a lot of ways because we don't know they've gone, right? I mean, you don't know if, Scott Joseph, Scott hasn't been here in 3 years. We don't know that. That's not something we look at every day. What happened to Scott? He disappeared. We haven't seen him in 3 years, and they just go away, and we don't know it, and we don't have a chance to fix it. And then we go and spend, $700 a copy to try to get them back to sell another car again, right? It's the cycle that we've done forever in this industry. And if we just realize that all we have to do is do stuff that we do today, just do it a little better, we'd have this problem licked.
What's funny is we bring up, understanding what the client wants. And I say this all the time, and I get a lot of nods, yes, but I don't know if there's a lot of action out there to solve it. Most businesses, at least in auto, most businesses do a very good job of marketing or doing some type of owner loyalty program where they're constantly communicating and marketing or advertising to a client to keep them from leaving them. Mm-hmm. But here's what's amazing. At some point when a client defects, they've been getting all those marketing and advertising messages. All right. And what's the go-to to win them back? The go-to typically is, hey, let's send them some more of those coupons or offers, some of those marketing and advertising that they chose to ignore when they left us in the first place. But now that they're left us, that'll get them back in. It just doesn't work that way.
It's totally illogical, right? It's totally illogical. And I probably have 4 or 5 of those exact coupons sitting on my desk at home. And to me, I don't, and listen, there are some consumers that those coupons work, but they don't work for everybody. And that's, I think, where we really fall down, is that I don't think we understand, like other hospitality industry, businesses do. We don't understand at the individual level what really that client was looking for in order to be loyal, in order and be able to have that retention. And again, it goes back to data, it goes back to tracking. What are we, and understanding where the defection points are in our business, and how do we close those gaps? How do we plug the holes?
Where do you think there's a mistake when it deals with client retention that a lot of the business leaders probably, maybe they're thinking, you know what, I'm doing the right thing here. This is a good decision, but it ended up backfiring on them. It is a mistake. In other words, I guess, all right, well, we sat in a conference, right? And you hear a bunch, and we won all the ideas and I'm referring to business bourbon and cigars, right? You won all the ideas because they're not all good, but sometimes one idea spurs another one, or it sparks what ends up being a great idea. But at the same time, you hear a lot of some things that, you're like, all right, they're not getting this. We've got to shift this in a different direction. What would be some examples where people think this is the right thing to do, but it is clearly a mistake, and they need to stop thinking like that or doing that?
There's two things, and I think if it's okay with you, I'll use business bourbon and cigars, another shameless plug, as an example in this.
I'm not shame. I have no shame here.
There, I know you. I know you. That picture that people can't see hanging on your wall tells you that you have no shame at all. And for those who know,
he's not referring to this one. He's referring to the one over here.
Yeah. For those who know. I will, at the last event, Scott, I was sitting at one of the tables, one of the mastermind tables, and we were talking about service and client retention and so on and so forth. And I got to tell you, I wanted to jump out of my skin. I'm sitting there with a group of forward-thinking people, and I was asked to be the moderator of the table, and I'm taking notes, and it's expand our espresso bar, fix this, fix that in the lounge, do this. And I'm thinking, my Lord, have I gone through a time warp here? Am I back in 1980? Are we going to talk putting greens and espresso machines and shoe shine machines now, which is hopefully everybody in our industry has realized that that's not what people want. It's not what people want. They want good service. They want to be treated well. They want a fair price. They want to get in and they want to get out. And moreover, servicing a vehicle is a big unknown for 99% of the consumers. One of the mistakes that we make as an industry is because we're too close to it, we don't really understand the anxiety and the angst that's part of that. What most people want, most and foremost, is for somebody to be their subject matter expert and help them, guide them through that process so they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But we don't do a good job at that because we just assume because we get it, and we realize why it takes so long to get a part and why this costs so much. And we never really explain why and things of that nature. We just think that everybody understands this business the way that we do, and nothing could be further from the truth. The other thing that I'm going to add to this, and this is going to be for all my technology vendors out there, technology for the sake of technology is a bad idea. All right. Listen, I've been in the technology side for 30 years, as I mentioned, and there's lots of really bad technology out there. Now, what I mean by that is that it's not that it doesn't work. Okay. It's not that doesn't have great intentions. It just doesn't meet at least my litmus test of what technology should do. And that is, and you're going to be surprised by this because it's got nothing to do with making money. Okay. Does it improve the client experience? Does it improve the livelihood and the experience of your associates in the dealership? Okay. And does it make everybody's lives easier? Does it make the client's experience easier, less friction? Brian Kramer and I spent hours talking about this at that last event that we were all at, about this whole notion of frictionless. And we throw that word around, and I'm not sure enough people really understand what it means. What it really means is make it easy. Do we make it easy for people to do business? Do we make it easy for our people to do their jobs? There's too much technology out there that actually makes it harder for the service advisor or the technician or the sales or the F&I manager to do their job. And as a result, we end up with a crappier process. We thought we were doing the right thing by developing some technology that was supposed to help. And in fact, we end up making the process worse because we've made it harder for them to do their jobs because of technology. Now, I'm not suggesting we go back to, pencils and papers, but we have to be more discerning when it comes to technology and what we employ. And I say this to dealers all the time. You got to ask those questions. Okay, does it make the experience of the client better? Does it make the experience and the job that your staff have to do better, right? And does it make the whole thing easier? Does it make the process, more desirable more frictionless. And the last thing and the most important thing is that, can I measure it? Can I measure success? Because if it's just something out there that's nebulous that I really don't know if that it's working or not, I used to, on every pitch that I would do back in the day when I was out doing direct selling, one of the first questions I would ask a dealer is I would say, hey, before we get started, show me the closet. And they go, what are you talking about? The closet in your dealership, the place where you park all that stuff that you bought over the years that nobody uses anymore. Because every dealer has one of those closets, right? They all have a closet full of shit that some sales rep came in and pitched them, and it looked like a great idea and nobody uses it anymore, right?
Yeah.
And and then I would go on to say, look, I'm here to sell you something that's not going to end up in that closet, because first and foremost, what I'm selling you is going to be very measurable, that we're as a vendor partner is doing our job for you. And if it's not, you should get rid of us.
Yeah. It's so funny you bring up listen, from a client experience, I want to really comfortable if I have to be at the store. By the way, I don't want to be at the store. But if I had to be at the store as a client, I sure in the heck don't want to be there long enough to where I'm sitting there, putting and playing 18 rounds of golf. But at the same time, right? So maybe those things can help, like from an experience standpoint, like while I'm there, that's more enjoyable. But the reality is this: the billions of dollars that are lost, taken from dealerships every year from third-party independent repair shops. And I'm sure there are a few of them out there, but I've never seen one. And I've been all over the country. All right. How many of those have putting greens? How many of those have the lounges that we put all this money into? What if so you talked earlier, your very first thing you talked about was, we talked about our client experience, and it comes down to how do we save them time, effort, and money. Time, effort, and money, right? So what if we took those dollars and put them into other things that actually help them save time, effort, and money?
Took those dollars, you could take a fraction of those dollars and it would have a greater impact. Take 10% of those dollars. I mean, it's funny you mentioned
that's the money you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
that's the money you're talking about outside of marketing.
That is the retention spend that I'm talking about. All right. And
correct.
It's you mentioned the aftermarket. The largest retailer, as measured by revenue per square foot, okay, the most successful retail in tires is a company out of Scottsdale, Arizona called Discount Tire. They're more prominent on the West Coast than they are on the East Coast, but they're all over. And they sell more dollars per square foot in tires than anybody in the industry by a factor of 3 or 4. And I happened to be in one of those stores a couple of years back. And let me tell you something. There was 4 red chairs in the waiting lounge that were made of hard plastic. And there was a Tiger Beat magazine from 1982 on the reading pile. And that was it, so they are not wonderful places to go hang out in. They understand that. And they don't want you to hang out. They want to get you in and out as fast as you can, because they understand that's what the consumer wants. They don't want to hang around. Let's not, if we could just take a fraction of what these OEs are forcing these dealers to spend on their facilities, okay, and things of that nature, take 5% of that and divert that to real hard processes, training, and technology that would have a direct impact on loyalty and retention, we'd solve our problem. It's not like it's going to take a ton of money, but right now there's no focus on it, in my opinion.
It would take a lot of money, but you're not talking about new money. You're talking about a reallocation of money.
I'm talking about reallocation, but I'm also, it would take a fraction of what dealers are spending on other things today.
Correct.
I tell dealers all the time, I actually don't know what the number is these days, because I'm sure it's changed in our post-COVID world. But this notion of, $500, $600, $700 or whatever a copy on advertising, I tell dealers, peel $50 off of that. Just peel $50 off of that every month and stick that into a pot, okay, and spend it on something else. Hell, spend it on what I'm trying to do with tires, and you'll see a 5-fold return over what you're currently doing today, which is reactionary at best. We let them go. Right. We spend money to get them back. We let them go. We spend money to get them back. Hey, let's try something new. Let's spend some money so they don't leave in the first place. And I don't think we truly understand what we spend there, because I think if we really looked at it, the number's probably close to zero, because I'm not 100% sure that dealers intimately understand, well, what are the key drivers to this? Which is something that we've been trying, my company and my team have been trying to get dealers to understand now for the past 10 years, is that it's not the only thing, but tires play a critical role in that. And oh, by the way, dealers have an 8.2% share of the replacement tire market. Okay. We sell 100% of the cars, new ones, and we sell 8% of the tires. So that ought to tell you something right there. I mean, and I get in meetings all the time with dealers, and they nod their head at the data from Cox and others that say, yep, tires is a leading cause of defection. The OEs all know it. And then when I say, but you do 8% of tires, and they go, well, yeah, but according to my service manager, we're number 2 in the region. With Honda, we sold 300 tires last month. Yeah, but you could have sold 3,000.
Right.
Being number, it's sort of like being the I'm not going to say it. Something about.
Well, but this goes to what you're also saying, goes to one of the 3 legs in terms of growing a business, right? Improving the frequency and or the transaction value. If they were in there for something else, and you're able to also sell tires, which would then also up to an alignment, if they're doing it correctly, that's how you increase the transaction value on the tire. But the tires can improve the frequency that people bought, but it goes beyond that growth. What's not being counted is what you also mentioned earlier, and that is if someone has serviced within the last 12 months, the likelihood, if they're within a purchase decision, the likelihood of you closing that deal or being the dealer that sells them a car goes to 75% versus much lower if not. So there are benefits besides the immediate business that compound. I mean, that's
you're selling them something that they need. It's not like you're selling them something, it's tires are like, I say this all the time.
To me, it's a safety issue
well,
as well.
So tires are also like that old saying, death and taxes, right? I mean, they're inevitable. You can put off an oil change forever if you want it, at your peril. It's probably not going to last. Motor's not going to last forever, but you could put off an oil change forever. You can't put off tires forever. You can't put off brakes forever. Eventually the tires will wear out. And, I tell dealers all the time, how many people have you seen driving around with sparks flying off their rims because there's no rubber left? That doesn't happen. So clearly they're getting the tires done somewhere. They're just only getting them done at the dealer 8.5% of the time.
So I'll see comments every now and then. I love the debate. It's almost like if you're talking at auto, the new car side, the tires is the equivalent of should I test drive or should I not on the front end side, right? Because it's pretty I'll see someone from your company throw up a post, and I'll see some people from dealerships come in and say, well, when I start making money on tires and compared to what I can do, the reality is though, if you're not selling them, it is the number one cause as to why people quietly leave you, right? There's this phrase going out, what is it? Quiet quitting, leaving a job. Yeah. Well, this is quiet defection. All right. They get out of their pattern. It's a pattern interrupt. They out of convenience. Oh, the dealer doesn't sell tires, or they don't know you sell tires. They go to the convenient place or the perceived better value or lower price. They buy their tire, and now they are out of a pattern. They had no intention of leaving you. It just happened. And now they're getting marketing and advertising from the people that sold them tires. And guess what? They're selling them and advertising oil changes and everything else. And they're out of the warranty now. It's not just about the money you make on the tire. It's about the frequency of them constantly coming back.
Exactly. And most importantly, when it comes time to buy another vehicle, they're obviously not going to buy another vehicle from the guy that they're buying their tires and getting their oil changed from. But the most important part is that they've lost their connection to you.
Correct.
Okay? You spend $750, okay, to capture them in the first place, and we sold them a car, and we sent them a welcome package, and we did all the things on the front end, and we gave them a coupon for their first oil change, and we did all the right things, and we smother them with love for the first year. When, by the way, the first year of ownership, we make hardly any money because there's nothing to really do, but we smother them for love. And then when it comes time to do the one thing that is likely going to have an impact on whether or not they stay with you long term, we just drop the ball. We just don't do it for a lot of reasons. And we don't do it because, as you pointed out, trust me, I hear this conversation, Scott, every day. We don't make any money on tires. And I tell people the same thing. When I'm about to say, I'm going to put the caveat, you don't have to do this. But if I was a dealer today, if you gave me the keys to your dealership, I would tell you to give them away. That's how I believe they're that impactful downstream to your business, that it would be a good business decision and a good ROI to give them away, right? But you don't have to. That's the beautiful thing. You just have to be more proactive in that process. We've got, I tell dealers this all the time. The dealers have such a huge advantage here over the aftermarket because we've got, if you think about the ownership life cycle, right? And you see me put up these waterfall charts that every OE has where, retention's relatively high for the first, 3 years, and then it drops, right?
Yep.
And it drops like a rock, hence the waterfall, right? We spend all this money up front to watch them drop off. If we can just flatten that curve a little bit, and keep more of them coming back, the impact it has on the business is substantial. It's just, and you don't have to, like I said, you don't have to give them away, but the advantage the dealers have is that period, right? We've got them for the first 3 years because the car's still covered under warranty. They're coming to us regardless. Okay.
Yep.
We own them. That's our opportunity to learn about what they want, learn about what makes them happy. What are their key drivers to get data on their car? Okay. This is where, I mentioned earlier, we started our company on the notion of creating data around tires, right? By the time the 3rd year rolls around, Scott, we have enough visits in our stores that I can very accurately predict when that customer is going to need tires, almost to the day, dude. I can predict when they're going to need tires, which allows, that's the power of data. You're a data junkie. You love this. That's the power of data, because what does that give me? That gives me the opportunity to preempt these guys that don't have this data. Right. I can start marketing to that customer 6 months, a year, 6 months, 3 months, 2 months before that due date. Okay. And I can draw them back into me with an offer before they're even going to consider, because the guys in the aftermarket, they have not frequented the aftermarket yet. Okay. They got no information on that customer. We've got all the information.
Just the educational opportunities and the loyalty that can drive. Man, there's a lot of good opportunities. Let me ask you one final question here. What do you think? Is there a mistake that a lot of people or business leaders, they just bury their face in the sand? They want to ignore. They just hope it kind of goes away as it relates to client retention.
Well, I don't know if it's something they're burying their head in the sand. I think, speaking of dealers now, I think that the mistake that a lot of dealers make is that, well, this will take care of itself. That's what my service manager is there for. And if we just keep doing what we're doing, this will take care of itself. And if we, I can't stress enough, if you really want to understand what the future of your business looks like, spend more time in your service department, right? Like, park a chair in there and watch those processes, because
I got to tell you, Dave, I mean, I don't know your opinion of this, but I know that dealers have been doing very well financially over the last 2 to 3 years since COVID hit, but we haven't been selling high volumes of cars as an industry. And sooner or later, those lower volumes of cars also mean lower number of people coming through that are under warranty, that we own the relationship, right? That means a higher percentage of people are owning older cars, or cars that may not have a new car warranty on them. And those are the ones that typically defect and go to independent repair shops.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I was in a group with a bunch of General Motors dealers not that long ago, and this topic came up, and there was happened to be a guy in the room that was a customer of mine and a service director who I respect a great deal. And I was in his office one day and you were talking about what's going on with chip shortages and cars. And he was like, oh my God, he said, the next 3 or 4 years is going to be just brutal for our service department. I said, I don't know where he goes to me, I don't know where my customers are coming from. And I looked right at him and I said, hey, that tire shop or that lube shop across the street, where do you think they get their customers from? They don't sell cars to get their customers. They get their customers. Exactly. They get their customers the old-fashioned way. They go after them, right? And that's what dealers need to do here, right? They just need to go after them. People aren't buying cars. People haven't been able to buy cars because they can't get them, or their dealers are charging stupid amounts over sticker, which means what? They're keeping the one that they've got longer, right? Which means they need more service. Okay, there's your opportunity in this, right? Go after those customers that have the older cars that traditionally defect from you. Go after those customers, get them to come back, right? And then when cars do come around, when we can have more to sell, selling that replacement. But there's opportunity, abound. I mean, it's, we're not selling as many cars. The aftermarket, the tire industry, TIA and the aftermarket are predicting huge years in the coming years, huge, because of what I just said, because people are keeping their cars longer right now than they ever had, which is going to have a huge uptick in service on those higher mileage vehicles that dealers typically have lost at this point. That's okay. Again, divert some of that money that you're now not spending to sell cars and spend it advertising on your service department. Call up J&L and get them to do some marketing campaigns in your service department. All right. And get some of those customers to come back in, go back, get old fashioned, do a tent sale, right? Yeah. Back in the day, man, do a tent sale, Scott. do a tent sale for service and get some customers to come back in that normally wouldn't because they're in high mileage vehicles. And you know what? When they come back in, stop focusing on, hey, let me appraise your car so I can flip you out of that into something that I can't sell you because I don't have one. All right. Stop that crap. Do some service work on their high mileage vehicle. You make more margin on that stuff anyway.
I will tell, there is a little something that everybody can do. And it really, if you're B2C, doesn't matter if you're a dealer or not. We all do a pretty good job of keeping records, at least email, phone, and mailing address of our clients, right? And so I know a lot of people are using that information to upload into Facebook and find those people and serve them ads and this and that, and that's easy. But what people are not doing is putting it into paid search. Mm-hmm. And the reason that is so important is if you're a dealer, and let's say you're the dealer and I'm your client, and my warranty's up, right? And gosh, I just called you and you're 2 weeks out before you can get me in, which is a common thing right now with dealers. It's not like you can just call and get in same day. I'm like, I just want to get this done now. I've thought about it now. It's on my mind, because if I don't do it right when I'm thinking about it and I have to put it off, that becomes a pain to me. Right. That's more effort to me, right? That doesn't save me time. So I'm like, all right, oil change near me. Now, you would never pay to serve me that ad because it's too generic, right? There's too many people doing that search. You'd run out of budget within 2 days. Your ad spend budget would be gone. So you're not doing that. But what you can do is you can take that previous customer info, share it with Google. All right, it's all private, it's all legal. Share it with Google, and I can build digital marketing campaigns that are specific, or you could build digital marketing campaigns that are specific. So when I do that search as your client, it's basically like me raising my hand and saying, I'm about to leave you, Dave. I'm looking for an oil change near me right now. And you know what? I've been using your service department now for the last 3 years. Why would I do that search if I wasn't? It's almost like we finally have the opportunity for people to identify people the moment they're defecting, right? And you can build specific campaigns that are worth a little bit more money to get your offer out there in front of that person, in front of that client. And that doesn't have to be auto. That can be any industry.
There's so many things, Scott. There's so many things. I mean, you touch on so many things, or we could spend another hour talking about this stuff. But even start with their websites. I was speaking at a conference a couple of years ago, and I had done this before in the hotel, and I actually brought it up live. And it was a Ford dealer that I happened to know, and I went to their webpage, and I went to the search bar, and I typed in tires, trying to buy. I know I keep coming back to tires, but that's what I do, buddy. But I typed in tires, and it took me to an ad for an F-150. So you cannot find a place, you cannot find any information about buying tires on this dealer's website. Not one.
Yeah.
Well,
not only that, but if you go to most dealers' websites,
service department,
you know that it is an afterthought. I mean,
sure.
Most of the attention's on the front side.
For sure.
All right. Listen, we're way over time here. I appreciate you giving us this extra bonus material, buddy.
No word. You get me, you know something, I come on here, you get me all fired up. You know, I was starting to sound like Tully Williams, for crying out loud. I'm so fired up. My watch thinks I'm working out, dude.
That's great.
Either my heart rate's up or I'm moving around too much, but my watch.
We need to schedule one every day. Who knows? You'll come into the next Business Bourbon and Cigars with abs.
You and I both know that ain't gonna happen.
Ben Stock's out there doing his wheel. All you got to do is do this show and accomplish the same thing. So, all right. So I am positive. Great interview, buddy. Thank you. The business leaders here. If you should have a better understanding of some of the types of things we talked about, saving people time, effort, and money, better understanding of some of the mistakes that we probably all make to some level, but more importantly, how we can avoid them. I want to thank you for sharing all your knowledge, your experience. Can you tell us a little bit more real quick about Traction, and specifically how does it help people retain more clients?
We are, first and foremost, we are all about trying to help dealers retain customers through selling things that they need, like tires. We focus on tires and alignments. We develop some technology that makes it easier to do that, easier to measure the opportunity, easier to convey that opportunity to the consumer. We do that by directly texting this information to the consumer. So the minute they drive into your service department, they get a health report on their smartphone, tells them if they need tires, tells them if they need an alignment, and helps the service advisor do their job in terms of quoting and all that stuff. And there's a whole lot of features in this, but the idea is to help create a very easy, frictionless process to help dealers sell more tires. And again, it isn't about the money to be made on tires. There is money to be made on tires, lots of money to be made on alignments, but the whole thing is really about retaining customers through those services. And that's what we do. We've really shaken up the industry, or shook up the industry, I should say, in the last 12 months here, Scott. We've come out with a brand new model. We're a complete OpEx model now. We've got a lot of competitors now that we started this space 12 years ago. We got a couple of competitors now, and it's become a big equipment spend business. And I decided a year ago with my team to change that. We've gone completely with an OpEx model, so there's no big upfront fees. It's all a monthly software fee to use the platform, and we are growing like crazy. I've got, I say this lightly because I hope there's people listening that might be interested, but we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. Stuff we're selling today, we're going to be installing next May. That's how booked we are. Nice. With business. So it's been a really good year for us, and I love talking about this stuff. So the last thing I'll say is that I'm really passionate about this stuff. Anybody ever wants to talk about this stuff, I'm a phone call away. I'm going to share my phone number if that's all right with everybody. If anybody wants to call me and chat about tires, I'd love to. 714-726-9594.
Hold on here.
Yep.
714-726. What is it?
9594. And it is always on, as my wife will tell you. And if anybody wants to talk tires, I love to talk about this subject. So give me a call and we can talk some tires.
So if you're watching, it's on the screen right there. 714, Dave's number, 714-726-9594. And we've got your website scrolling there at the bottom. Perfect. Periodically through the show. Traction.com, and that's Traction with an X in the middle of it. So Traction.com. Absolutely. All right, Dave Boyle, thank you. And I want to thank the MCC Nation for tuning in. Make sure you follow us and subscribe to Move Crush Count the podcast here at movecrushcount.com, as well as subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Join our Facebook group and our LinkedIn group. Experts like Dave are on there, help answer any questions you might have. Plus, you get notified on all our future guests and new episodes. Do me a huge favor. If you're watching or listening, share this episode. Our growth comes from people like you who recommend the show, or maybe a specific episode to your friends, your colleagues, your family. So please share it. Today's interview was sponsored by J&L Marketing. J&L is a digital and direct marketing agency that delivers results with strategies that help you outsmart competitors so you don't have to outspend them. And right now I'm gonna do something special. If you are connected to me at all on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, send me a private message on any one of those channels. The first 7 people, Dave, you already get one of these. I'm gonna send it out today. But the first 7 people to do that will get a Move Crush Count t-shirt. That's an old one, so it's not. We don't have any more retro Move Crush Count t-shirts, but we've got some new ones similar to the one I'm wearing, and we'll get those out to you. Make sure when you do that, request your shirt and tell me the size that you need, and we'll ship that out right away to you.
And we mentioned this earlier. If you don't know what Business Bourbon and Cigars is, I'm going to give you another plug. Check that out, because there's another event coming up in the spring, and I'm going to be there. Haven't missed one. Can't wait for it. So looking forward to that too, Scott.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do for future shows. I'm going to get with Sandy, and I'm going to see if we can do some type of special thing on the price for first like 3 or 4 people that maybe send a message out.
That'd be cool.
So we'll do something like that. So once again, I'm Scott Joseph. Thanks for joining us on Move Crush Count. Have a great day, everybody.